When the bank congratulated me on selling my house, I was in the middle of picking napkin colors for my sister's $100,000 wedding I had already paid for. By the time I realized my childhood signature had been stolen and upgraded into a power of attorney, the buyers were already clinking champagne glasses at the closing table. None of them knew the bride was walking down the aisle in a dress paid for with the proceeds of my stolen home. My name is Ivy Lopez, and if my 34 years on this earth have taught me anything, it is that numbers do not lie, but the people entering them into the spreadsheet almost always do. I sat in the sterile, gray waiting area of Gate C12 at SeaTac International Airport, the hum of the terminal vibrating against the soles of my boots. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Seattle rain was doing its best to wash the world gray, a fitting backdrop for my mood. I had my laptop balanced precariously on my knees, the screen glowing with the most terrifying document I had ever created. It was not a risk assessment for Ridgeview Analytics, the firm where I spent 60 hours a week predicting financial disasters for Fortune 500 companies. No, this was a simple Excel sheet titled Jade's Wedding, and the sum at the bottom of column B was currently glowing in aggressive conditional formatting red. $112,450. That was the number. That was the price of being the good big sister. That was the cost of keeping the peace in the Lopez family. I rubbed my temples, staring at the line item for custom-dyed silk napkins, which had cost more than my first car. I was flying back to Redstone Hills, Colorado, a town that existed solely to judge its inhabitants based on the make of their trucks and the size of their diamonds. My younger sister, Jade, was getting married in 48 hours. I had paid for the venue, I had paid for the catering, I had paid for the open bar that would inevitably result in Uncle Mike falling into the koi pond. I had done it all because that was my role. Ivy the fixer, Ivy the wallet, Ivy the one who made it out and owed a debt to those who stayed behind. I took a sip of lukewarm airport coffee, trying to swallow the bitterness that had nothing to do with the roast. My finger hovered over the trackpad, ready to close the spreadsheet and pretend that my savings account had not just been hollowed out like a Halloween pumpkin. Then, my phone buzzed against the hard plastic of the seat. It was not a text. It was a push notification from my secure banking app, followed immediately by an email alert from the county recorder's automated system. I frowned. I monitored my credit like a hawk. It was an occupational hazard. I expected maybe a fraud alert for the overpriced coffee I had just bought, or perhaps a duplicate charge from the florist. I unlocked the screen. The banner across the top was cheerful, bright green, and absolutely nauseating. Congratulations on the successful sale of your property. I blinked. I reread it. My brain, usually so sharp at connecting disparate data points, stalled. I did not have a property for sale. I owned exactly one asset of significant value, a lovingly restored craftsman bungalow on the north side of Queen Anne Hill in Seattle. It was my sanctuary. It was the one thing I had bought entirely for myself, with no input from my mother, Linda, or my father, Charles. I swiped the notification open, my heart beginning to hammer a frantic rhythm against my ribs. It had to be a phishing scam. It had to be a mistake. But the document that loaded on my screen was not a scam. It was a PDF of a closing statement, official and final, time-stamped 20 minutes ago. I zoomed in, my fingers trembling slightly. There was the address, my address. There was the sale price. $780,000, a fair market value. And there, under the seller section, was my name, Ivy Lopez. But next to the section for receiving funds, the routing number did not belong to my bank in Seattle. It belonged to a credit union in Redstone Hills, Colorado. The account holder was listed as a joint trust. I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving me cold and dizzy. I scrolled down to the signature page, the air in the terminal suddenly too thin to breathe. How could a house be sold without the owner present? How could a deed transfer without a notary looking me in the eye? Then I saw it. Right above the signature line, typed in standard legal font, were the words, Ivy Lopez. by attorney-in-fact Linda Harper, and below it was a signature. I stared at that ink. Displayed in high resolution on my retina display, it was a loop, a sharp, jagged cross on the T, and a flourishing finish. It was my mother's handwriting, trying to look official. But it was the document attached to the deed that made the bile rise in my throat. It was a power of attorney. I clicked the attachment. It was a grainy scan of a document dated 16 years ago. My mind flashed back, violent and vivid. I was 18 years old. I was packing for college, terrified and excited. My father had sat me down at the kitchen table with a stack of papers. Just standard stuff. "Ivy," he had said, his smile warm and reassuring. "In case something happens while you are away, in case we need to access your student loan portal or sign for a package, it is just a formality. Good practice for the real world." I had signed it. I had signed everything they put in front of me because I was 18 and they were my parents, and the idea that they would weaponize my trust was a concept that had not yet entered my universe. I looked back at the date on the closing statement. Today. They had used a 16-year-old piece of paper, signed by a naive teenager, to sell my adult home out from under me while I was sitting in an airport, waiting to fly to a wedding I was already bankrolling. My phone buzzed again, jarring me so hard I nearly dropped it. Incoming call, Mom. I stared at the picture of her on my screen. It was a selfie of us from last Christmas. She looked glowing. I looked tired. I answered. My voice caught somewhere between a scream and a whisper. "Hello?" "Ivy, thank goodness," Linda's voice chirped, bright and frantic, completely devoid of the weight of grand larceny. "Listen, I need you to double-check the cash envelopes for the planner when you land. Your father thinks we should tip the catering manager an extra $500 because they threw in the late-night taco bar, but I told him you would handle the calculations." I sat there, frozen. She was talking about taco bars. She was talking about $500. "Mom," I said, the word feeling like gravel in my mouth. "Oh, and honey, make sure you look happy when you get off the plane." She plowed on, oblivious. "Ryan's parents are coming to the rehearsal dinner tonight, and we need to present a united, prosperous front. You know how judging that family can be." "Mom," I tried again, my grip on the phone tightening until my knuckles turned white. "I just got an email." There was a pause on the other end of the line. It was brief, perhaps only a second, but to a trained ear, it was deafening. It was the hesitation of a gambler waiting to see if the bluff held. "An email?" she asked, her tone dropping an octave, becoming guarded. "Ivy, you are always checking work emails. Can you just turn off the corporate brain for one weekend? This is Jade's moment. Do not make this about you and your stress." "It is not a work email," I said. "It is from the title company." "Signal is breaking up," she said immediately, the speed of the lie breathtaking. "I can't hear you. Honey, just get here safe. Love you." The line went dead. She hung up. She sold my house. And then she hung up on me because she didn't want to have the conversation before I was trapped in her territory. I lowered the phone, my breathing shallow. I looked around the gate. A family was eating McDonald's across from me. A businessman was shouting into his headset. The world was continuing to spin, completely unaware that my entire financial foundation had just been liquidated. My phone pinged again, a voice message from Jade. I shouldn't have listened to it. I should have called the police right there. But some masochistic part of me needed to know the extent of the madness. I pressed play and held the phone to my ear. "Ivy, oh my God. Okay. Do not be mad." Jade's voice squealed, breathless and giddy. "But the planner said we could upgrade to the grand finale fireworks package if we paid in full today. And I know. We said budget cap. But Mom just called and said she found some extra liquidity in an old account, and she wired it over $10,000 for 5 minutes of gold sparkles. Ivy. Can you believe it? It is covered. Everything is perfect. See you soon." Extra liquidity in an old account. That was what she called my home, my sanctuary, the place where I spent my nights reading, the walls I had painted myself, the garden I had planted bulb by bulb. To them, it was just liquidity. It was just a line item to be liquidated so Jade could have 5 minutes of sparkles in the sky. I looked back at the PDF. Seller Ivy Lopez. I closed my eyes. I am a senior risk analyst at Ridgeview. My job is to look at a company, find the rot in the foundation, and predict when the structure will collapse. I spot embezzlement in ledger gaps. I spot negligence in safety reports. I am paid a very high salary to be the most paranoid person in the room. And yet, the biggest risk exposure of my life had been sleeping in the guest room of my childhood home. I had scrutinized strangers for a living, but I had never turned that lens on the people who shared my DNA. I had assumed that the family tax I paid the tuition help, the car payments, the wedding costs was the maximum liability. I never modeled a scenario where they would liquidate the principal asset. Flight 294 to Denver, with service to Redstone Hills, is now boarding Group A, the gate agent announced. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, like I was wading through concrete. I slung my laptop bag over my shoulder. I had two choices. Choice A. I could stay here. I could call the police, call a lawyer, scream until security came. I could stop the transfer. But the money was already moving. The closing was done. If I stayed here, I was just a victim shouting into a phone in Seattle while they spent my money in Colorado. Choice B. I could get on that plane. I looked at the boarding pass on my phone. Then, a text message banner slid down from the top of the screen. It was Linda again. I know you are probably confused, but please, Ivy, don't make us look bad in front of Jade's in-laws. We will sort out the paperwork later. Just be the good big sister. We did this for the family name. For the family name. I stared at those words until they blurred. They thought I was the same Ivy who signed those papers at 18. They thought I was the Ivy who paid the bills and asked for nothing but a thank you that never came. They thought I was safe. They thought I would eat the loss to avoid a scene. They thought that because I paid for the wedding, I would not dare ruin it. I walked toward the gate agent, scanning my digital pass. The machine beeped, a cheerful little sound approving my passage. Have a nice flight, Ms. Lopez, the agent said, smiling. Thank you, I said. My voice was steady, terrifyingly steady. I walked down the jet bridge, the cold Seattle air seeping through the gaps in the metal. I was not going home to celebrate. I was not going home to be the maid of honor. I was going home to be the risk event they never saw coming. Linda asked if I was going to make them look bad. She was worried about a scene. She was worried about embarrassment. She had absolutely no idea what I was capable of when I stopped being a daughter and started being an auditor. I found my seat. Window, row 12. I buckled the belt. I looked out at the tarmac as the rain streaked horizontally across the glass. This time, you calculated wrong, I whispered to the reflection in the window. I pulled out my phone one last time before switching it to airplane mode. I opened my work email and drafted a message to the legal department at Ridgeview. Not to send, but to organize my thoughts. Then I opened a new note. Title assets to recover. Item 1, $112,000. Wedding costs. Item 2, $780,000. House sale proceeds. Item 3. My dignity. The plane engines roared to life, a deep, ascending whine that vibrated in my chest. I leaned my head back against the seat. They wanted a show. They wanted a perfect wedding. They wanted the world to see how successful the Lopez family was. I would give them exactly what they wanted. I would give them the most memorable wedding Redstone Hills had ever seen. The plane lurched forward. I did not close my eyes. I watched the ground fall away, turning the cars and houses into insignificant little specks. I was coming for them, and unlike the bank transfers they thought they had hidden, I would arrive with perfect visibility. To understand how I ended up in a window seat at 30,000 feet, watching my life dissolve into a cloud layer, you have to understand Redstone Hills. It is not just a town, it is a collective delusion. It is the kind of place where the grass is legally required to be a specific shade of emerald, where the cars in the driveways are leased at interest rates that would make a loan shark blush, and where "how are you" is not a question, but a challenge to prove you are doing better than the person asking. My parents, Charles and Linda, were the unofficial mayors of this facade. They did not own the town, but they certainly owned the anxiety that fueled it. Growing up, the dynamic in the Lopez household was as rigid as a corporate org chart. I was the infrastructure. Jade was the marketing department. I was the utilitarian support beam that kept the roof up. Jade was the chandelier that everyone admired when they walked in. It was not that they didn't love me. They loved me the way a homeowner loves a reliable furnace. They were glad I worked, but they didn't want to talk about me at dinner parties. I remember the day I received my acceptance letter to the University of Washington. Along with a nearly full academic scholarship, I was 18, bursting with a quiet, terrifying pride. I put the letter on the kitchen counter, right next to a stack of invoices for Jade's upcoming junior prom. "That is wonderful, Ivy," my father had said, barely looking up from his calculator. "That saves us a lot of money. Good girl." That was it. That saves us money. Not, "We are proud of you," not, "You worked so hard," just a relief that I was virtually cost neutral. 10 minutes later, the house erupted into chaos because the florist had sent the wrong shade of baby pink roses for Jade's corsage. I watched from the hallway as my mother spent 45 minutes on the phone, screaming and pleading, eventually agreeing to pay a rush fee of $200 to fix a flower that would be dead by morning. The entire cost of Jade's prom experience dress, limo share, professional photography, hair, makeup, came to nearly $1,500. They spent more on one night of high school vanity for Jade than they gave me for books during my entire freshman year. "Jade just needs a little extra help to shine," my mother would say, usually while signing a check. "You are strong, Ivy. You don't need the spotlight. You have substance." I took that word, substance, and I built a wall around myself with it. I moved to Seattle. I got a degree in finance. I became a certified fraud examiner. I landed a job at Ridgeview Analytics where I spent my days tearing apart the balance sheets of companies that tried to hide their rot behind glossy annual reports. The irony is almost suffocating. I became an expert at spotting when a CEO was lying about liquidity. I could sniff out a Ponzi scheme from 3 spreadsheets away. I made a career out of telling people, "This looks perfect, but the math does not work." But when it came to the Lopez family, I was blind. I had been conditioned since birth to believe that family first was a moral imperative, not a manipulation tactic. I turned off my professional radar the moment I crossed the threshold of my parents' house. I let them be the one blind spot in my field of vision. While I was climbing the corporate ladder, Jade was climbing the social one. She became what people call a micro-influencer. She had about 40,000 followers on Instagram who tuned in to see her curated life. She posted photos of brunch, of outfits she returned the next day, and of our perfect family. My parents loved it. They lived for the likes. Every time Jade tagged them in a post about best parents ever, they got a dopamine hit that lasted for days. They became addicted to her online narrative, and by extension, they became dependent on maintaining the lifestyle that fueled it. Then came Ryan Cole. Ryan was perfect. He was a sales executive at a mid-tier tech firm. He had a jawline that could cut glass, and he drove a Tesla. When he proposed to Jade, my parents did not see a marriage. They saw a rebranding opportunity. They immediately took over. This was not going to be a wedding. It was going to be a coronation. It was the event that would cement the Lopez family status in Redstone Hills for the next decade. The trouble started 3 months after the engagement. I flew home for a strategy meeting, which was just my family sitting in the living room with a bottle of wine and a laptop hooked up to the 60-inch television. "We have run the numbers," my father said, projecting an Excel spreadsheet onto the screen. "To do this right, and we must do it right. Considering who Ryan's family is, we are looking at a baseline budget." He clicked a cell. The number $100,000 appeared on the screen. I choked on my water. $100,000, Dad. That is insane. You guys just refinanced the house last year to pay off the credit cards. "It is an investment, Ivy," my mother interjected, her eyes wide and serious. "Ryan is going to be huge in the industry. This wedding puts Jade in the right circles. It puts us in the right circles. We cannot look cheap." Okay, I said, putting my analyst hat on. So where is the capital coming from? Silence, absolute, heavy silence, on the television screen, the cells next to venue. Catering and decor were blank. Slowly, 3 heads turned toward me. My father cleared his throat. Well, Ivy, we were hoping, look, you are the success story. You have that big job in Seattle. You have no kids. You have your own home. You are doing so well. We are so proud of you, my mother added, the words sounding practiced. This is your chance to really be a part of this, to show your sister how much you love her. You know Jade doesn't have the liquid assets you do. I can't fund a 6-figure party, I said, my voice tight. I have a mortgage. I have retirement savings. It is not a gift, my mother said quickly. She leaned forward, grabbing my hand. Her palms were sweaty. It is a bridge loan. Look, we are going to sell the cabin at Silver Pine Lake in the spring. The market is hot. As soon as that closes, we pay you back every cent, plus interest, if you want, but we need the cash flow now to lock in the vendors. The Silver Pine cabin, it was a small, dilapidated A-frame 2 hours north of town that my grandfather had left them. It was the only asset they had that wasn't leveraged to the hilt. You promise? I asked. The sale proceeds go to me. 100%, my father said, looking me dead in the eye. We just want Jade to have her day. You are the big sister, Ivy. You are the rock. Help us make this happen. I looked at Jade. She was curled up on the sofa, looking at me with those wide, expectant eyes that had gotten her out of every speeding ticket and failed class in her life. Please, Ivy, she whispered. I want you to be my maid of honor. I want you to stand next to me knowing you made it all possible. I caved. Of course I caved. I was the infrastructure. It was my job to hold them up. Fine, I said, but I pay the vendors directly. No cash transfers to you guys. Deal, my father said, beaming. Over the next 6 months, I bled money. I created a folder on my laptop titled Wedding Expenses. Every time I authorized a charge, I logged it, $5,000 for the deposit at Willowcrest Vineyard, $8,000 for the photographer who had been featured in Vogue, $12,000 for the floral arrangements because Jade insisted on imported peonies out of season, $4,000 for a custom DJ set. The numbers climbed. 50,000, 70,000, 90,000. Every time I hesitated, my mother would call me. The cabin is getting listed next week, she would say, or, we just got an offer on Silver Pine. Just waiting for the paperwork. I kept paying. I dipped into my emergency fund. I paused my 401k contributions. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I was being a good daughter, but there were cracks. Little moments where the mask slipped. About a month ago, I was back in Redstone Hills for the bridal shower, another event I paid for. We were having a family dinner at a steakhouse. The wine was flowing, and everyone was laughing. Jade was a little tipsy. She was showing off her ring to the waiter, talking about how perfect her life was. It is going to be the wedding of the century, Jade slurred slightly, leaning on my shoulder. And it is all thanks to my big sis. Don't mention it, I said, forcing a smile. Just make sure that cabin sells. Okay, my savings account is looking sad. Jade laughed. It was a sharp, brittle sound. Oh, don't worry about money, Ivy. You are rich, and if anything happens, you still have that house in Seattle, right? That place is worth a fortune. I froze for a second. What does my house have to do with anything? Nothing. Jade giggled, waving her hand dismissively. I am just saying, you are secure. You always have a backup plan. That is why we love you. My mother had kicked Jade under the table. I saw it. A sharp, quick motion. Jade has had too much Chardonnay, my mother said, her smile tight. Eat your steak, Ivy. I let it go. I brushed it off as drunk talk from a girl who had never paid a mortgage in her life. I told myself I was being paranoid. Why would they care about my house in Seattle? It was in my name. It was 5 states away. It was the one thing they couldn't touch. I sat there in that restaurant, cutting my meat, surrounded by my laughing family, and I felt a vague sense of unease. But I buried it. I buried it under 20 years of training that said, you do not question the people you love. Now, sitting on this plane, watching the clouds turn dark as we approached Colorado. That memory replayed in my mind with crystal clarity. If anything happens, you still have that house in Seattle. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a drunk comment. It was a stress test. She was testing the waters. She was seeing how attached I was to the asset they had already decided to liquidate. I opened my laptop on the tray table. I pulled up the spreadsheet again. I looked at the total $112,450. I had always thought the risk was that they would default. I thought the worst-case scenario was that the cabin wouldn't sell for enough money, and I would have to eat half the cost of the wedding. I thought I was risking my liquidity. I never imagined I was risking my title. I had spent my entire career analyzing external threats hackers, embezzlers, market crashes. I had never stopped to consider that the most dangerous people in my life were the ones who knew my mother's maiden name, the name of my first pet, and exactly what my signature looked like when I was 18 years old. They didn't just borrow money from me. They looked at my life, my hard work, my sanctuary, and they decided it was a communal resource. They decided that my stability was just a reservoir for them to drain whenever their vanity required a refill. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our initial descent into Denver. Please return your tray tables to their upright and locked positions. I closed the laptop with a snap. I had paid for the dress. I had paid for the wine. I had paid for the flowers. And now, it turned out, I had paid for the very transaction fees that sold my house out from under me. A cold, hard rage settled in my chest. It replaced the shock. It replaced the sadness. It felt like clarity. They wanted the perfect wedding fine. I would make sure they got exactly what they paid for, or rather, what I paid for. I looked out the window at the approaching mountains. Somewhere down there, in the fake perfection of Redstone Hills, my mother was probably bragging to a neighbor about how well she had handled the financing for the big day. My father was probably toasting to his own cleverness. Jade was probably practicing her vows. They thought the transaction was closed. They thought the money was theirs. They were about to learn the first rule of risk management: never steal from the person who keeps the receipts. I remember the smell of the office. It smelled of stale peppermint candy, old carpet, and the specific kind of lemon polish used to clean cheap mahogany desks. I was 18 years old, wearing an oversized university sweatshirt, sitting between Charles and Linda in a strip mall law office in downtown Redstone Hills. "This is just a formality, sweetheart," my father had said, sliding a thick stack of paper across the desk toward me. "Since you are going to be all the way over in Seattle, we need to make sure we can handle your affairs if, God forbid, something happens, or just to help you deposit those scholarship checks." The lawyer, a man named Mr. Henderson who played golf with my father every Sunday, clicked a heavy ballpoint pen and handed it to me. "It is good practice, Ivy," he said, offering a smile that didn't quite reach his watery eyes. "Think of this as Financial Literacy 101. These are loan skeletons, standard liability waivers, and a durable power of attorney. They are mostly mock-ups, so you get used to the weight of a contract, but the power of attorney is real. Just so your parents can act as your agents for your tuition accounts. Just sign where the little sticky note is," my mother added, patting my knee. "Don't worry your pretty little head about the fine print. That is why we are here, to protect you." I remembered the feeling of the pen digging into the paper. I remembered the scratching sound it made in the quiet room. I remembered feeling a strange, cold prickle at the base of my neck as I saw my name. Ivy Lopez, printed in bold letters at the top of a document I hadn't read. "But shouldn't I read it?" I had asked, pausing with the pen hovering over the signature line. My father let out a short, impatient huff, masked as a chuckle. "Ivy, do you trust us? Or do you want to sit here for 3 hours reading legalese you won't understand anyway?" We have a dinner reservation at 5. Do you trust us? The ultimate silencer. I signed. I signed page after page, creating a perfect record of my 18-year-old handwriting, handing over my autonomy because I didn't want to be the difficult daughter who made us late for dinner. Back in the present, sitting at gate C12 with the boarding announcements blaring around me, I felt like throwing up. My fingers flew across my phone screen, digging through the digital archives of my cloud storage. I am a data hoarder. I never delete anything. I scrolled past tax returns 2018, past resume drafts, all the way back to a folder simply titled College Docs. I opened the file named Scanned Legal 2008 PDF. There it was. It wasn't just a limited power of attorney for banking, as they had claimed. It was a general, durable power of attorney. The language was broad, sweeping, and terrifying. It granted Linda Harper and Charles Lopez the authority to sell, convey, and encumber real and personal property in my name, and there was no expiration date. Most ethical lawyers would have insisted on a sunset clause. Most ethical parents would have shredded it the day I graduated. But Mr. Henderson wasn't ethical, and my parents were apparently playing a long game I hadn't even known I was a participant in. They had taken a document signed by a teenager to manage a $3,000 scholarship fund and used it 16 years later to sell a $780,000 house. My hands were shaking so hard, I almost dropped the phone. I needed sanity. I needed a weapon. I dialed Marcus. Marcus Hale is my fiancé. A fact my parents conveniently forgot to mention to their friends because Marcus is not the right kind of successful. He didn't drive a flashy car or wear brand logos. He was a partner at a boutique firm in downtown Seattle that specialized in white-collar crime and forensic accounting. He was the one person who had looked at the Lopez family dynamic and called it what it was, a parasitic infection. Ivy. His voice was sharp, immediate. He answered on the first ring. You are supposed to be boarding. Is everything okay? They sold it, I whispered, huddling into the corner of the plastic seats, turning my back to the McDonald's eaters. Marcus, they sold the house. My house. Who sold what? Marcus's voice shifted instantly from partner mode to shark mode. Slow down. What are you talking about? My parents, I said, the words tasting like acid. I just got the closing statement. They used an old power of attorney I signed when I was 18. The title company accepted it. The money is gone. Marcus, it is in a credit union in Redstone Hills. I heard the sound of typing on the other end. Furious, rapid-fire typing. Give me the file number on the closing statement and the name of the title company. Swift and Hart Title and Escrow, I said, reading off the PDF. Closing agent, Sarah Jenkins. Give me 2 minutes, Marcus said. The line didn't go dead, but he went silent. I could hear him breathing, the click of his mouse, the hum of the servers in his office. I waited, watching the line of passengers shuffle toward the jet bridge. I felt like a ghost. I was watching people go on vacation, go on business trips, go home to families that probably didn't steal their real estate. Okay, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. I am looking at the county records and cross-referencing with the state licensing board, Ivy. Swift and Hart is not a standard title company. They are a high-risk lender front that operates out of a strip mall in Aurora. And your notary, Sarah Jenkins. Her license was suspended for 6 months in 2021 for improper acknowledgement of signatures. How did they get it through? I asked, tears pricking my eyes. How did a bank underwrite this? Because on paper, it looks legal, Marcus explained, his voice tight with controlled anger. If the power of attorney is recorded, and the notary verifies the agent your mother is who she says she is, the title company can push it through. It is what we call manufactured consent. It is sloppy, it is predatory, and it is exactly the kind of thing your parents would find if they went looking for a quick cash grab. I signed it, I said, my voice cracking. Marcus, I signed it. I am a fraud examiner. I tell people every day. Never sign what you don't read, and I signed it. You were 18, Marcus cut me off firmly. You were a child trusting your parents. Do not, I repeat, do not blame the victim here. This is fraud. Ivy. It is constructive fraud, and likely wire fraud, since the funds crossed state lines. My phone vibrated against my ear. A notification popped up. Jade sent you a video. I pulled the phone away for a second to look. It was a TikTok link. The thumbnail was Jade, beaming, holding a glass of champagne, with the caption, "Manifesting Abundance." I clicked it. I shouldn't have, but I did. The video was set to a trending pop song. Jade was doing a little dance in the kitchen of my parents' house. The text overlay read, "When your parents pull off a massive business deal just in time to upgrade your wedding to the platinum package. Blessed wedding season finance, girlies." "She knows," I said, staring at the screen. "What?" Marcus asked. "Jade," I said, my voice hardening. "She just posted a video about a massive business deal. She knows the money came from somewhere. She might not know they sold my house specifically, or maybe she does, and she has convinced herself it is just family money, but she knows they didn't earn that cash. That makes her a beneficiary of the fraud," Marcus said clinically. "Ivy, listen to me. You are about to get on that plane. You are going to be in the air for 2 hours. I can have a preliminary injunction drafted by the time you land. I can call the Colorado Attorney General's fraud unit. I know a guy in the Denver field office." He paused. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. "But you need to tell me what you want," he said softly. "If we do this, if we pull this thread, the whole sweater unravels. Your dad, your mom, they could face real charges. This isn't a civil dispute where they just pay you back. This is a felony. Are you ready for that?" I looked at the gate agent who was making the final boarding call. I looked at the college docs folder on my screen. I thought about the years of paying their bills, the years of buying my own Christmas presents and pretending they came from mom and dad so I wouldn't feel pathetic, the years of being the sensible one while they gambled with my emotional credit score. They had sold my house, my sanctuary, the only place on earth where I didn't have to be Ivy the fixer. "Ivy?" Marcus asked. "I'm getting on the plane," I said. "Okay, and the paperwork." "Do it," I said. "Check the chain of title, get the evidence, find every single person who touched that transaction. If the notary looked the other way, I want her license. If the lawyer drafted the sale knowing I wasn't there, I want his bar card." "And your parents?" Marcus asked. "Let them have the rehearsal dinner," I said, my voice cold, detaching from the daughter I used to be and becoming the analyst I was paid to be. "Let them think they got away with it. I want to see their faces when the bill comes due." "I love you," Marcus said. "I am going to burn their paper trail to the ground." "I love you too," I said. "I will see you on the other side." I hung up. I walked down the jet bridge, my boots echoing on the metal. I found my seat and buckled in. For 34 years, I had been the safety net. I had been the person who signed the papers to keep the peace. I had been the person who absorbed the shock so the Lopez family image wouldn't shatter. I looked at the safety card in the seat pocket in front of me. In case of emergency, put on your own mask before helping others. I had spent my whole life suffocating while trying to put a mask on people who were actively cutting my oxygen line. The plane taxied to the runway. The engines roared. "You just signed it because you trust us," my father had said. I closed my eyes as the G-force pushed me back into the seat. I didn't trust them, not anymore. And by the time I landed in Colorado, I wouldn't just be their daughter. I would be the plaintiff. I pulled out my notebook and a pen, my own pen this time. I turned to a fresh page. Phase 1, confirmation of fraudulent conveyance. Phase 2, asset freeze. Phase 3, public exposure. I wrote the words down, my handwriting sharp and jagged. Nothing like the loops of the 18-year-old girl who had signed her life away in that peppermint-scented office. This time, my signature wasn't going to save them. It was going to bury them. The air in Redstone Hills always smelled different than Seattle. In Seattle, the air smelled of rain, salt, and pine trees. Here, it smelled of dried sage, expensive leather interiors, and desperation masked as ambition. When I walked out of the arrival gate, I spotted them immediately. It was impossible to miss them. My mother, Linda, was holding a sign that said, "Welcome home," maid of honor in glittery gold lettering that probably cost $50 at a craft store. My father, Charles, was standing next to her, wearing a polo shirt that was tucked in just a little too tightly, his smile wide and practiced. Jade was not there. Of course she wasn't. The bride does not do airport pickups. The bride waits to be served. "Ivy," Linda shrieked, dropping the sign to rush at me. She engulfed me in a hug that smelled of heavy floral perfume and hairspray. It was a hug that felt less like affection and more like a frisking. "Oh, look at you. You look so tired. Is that a gray hair? We will get you a touch-up before the rehearsal dinner." "Hi, Mom," I said, my body stiffening against her embrace. I didn't hug back. I couldn't. My arms felt like lead weights at my sides. "Good to see you, sport," my father said, clapping me on the shoulder with a force that rattled my teeth. He grabbed my suitcase. "Let's get you home. We have a schedule to keep. The florist is coming at 3, and we need to approve the centerpieces." We walked to the car, a brand new luxury SUV that I knew for a fact they couldn't afford 2 years ago. "New car?" I asked, sliding into the back seat. "Lease," my father said quickly, adjusting the rearview mirror to look at his own teeth rather than at me. "Got a great deal. You know me, Ivy. I always find the angles." "Yes," I thought, staring at the back of his head. "I know exactly how you find the angles. Usually by cutting corners on someone else's property." The drive to the house was filled with chatter about the wedding. They talked about the guest list, the menu, the weather forecast. They talked about everything except the $780,000 elephant in the room. Not once did they mention Seattle. Not once did they ask how my flight was. Really, not once did they say the word house. When we pulled into the driveway of my childhood home, the facade was fully operational. The lawn was manicured to within an inch of its life. There were white ribbons tied around the oak trees. It looked like a set from a romantic comedy. The kind where the biggest problem is that the wrong cousin shows up. We walked inside, and the chaos hit me. Jade was standing on a pedestal in the middle of the living room, wearing a silk robe that said, "Bride in Rhinestones." A makeup artist was fussing over her eyebrows, and a woman I didn't recognize was steaming a veil in the corner. "Ivy," Jade screamed, waving a hand without turning her head. "Don't touch me. I am setting, but oh my God, look at the flowers. Aren't they insane?" "They are beautiful," I said, stepping over a box of party favors. "Okay, pause everything," Linda yelled, whipping out her phone. She tapped the screen, and suddenly the ring light attached to the case flared to life. "We are live. Hi, everyone. Look who just walked in. It is Ivy, the big sister, the legend, the woman who made this fairy tale possible." She shoved the phone in my face. I saw myself on the screen pale, dark circles under my eyes, looking like a ghost haunting my own life. "Say hi to the followers, Ivy," Linda chirped, her voice pitching up 2 octaves into her influencer mom persona. "Tell them how happy you are to support your baby sister." I stared at the camera lens. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab the phone and smash it against the granite countertop. I wanted to look into that camera and say, "My name is Ivy Lopez, and I am reporting a theft." Instead, I forced the muscles in my face to twitch upward. "Hi," I said deadpan. "It is going to be a wedding to remember." "Aw, she is shy," Linda laughed, pulling the phone back to herself. "She is the quiet genius of the family, the financier behind the scenes. We love a supportive queen." She ended the live stream and immediately dropped the smile. "Okay, go put your bags in the guest room. The caterer needs the final head count in 20 minutes, and I need you to cross-reference the RSVPs." I walked up the stairs to my old room. It had been turned into a storage unit for the wedding. Boxes of candles, favors, and linens were stacked on the bed. My old debate trophies and academic awards had been shoved into a dusty corner on the floor to make room for stacks of Bride magazine. I cleared a space on the bed and sat down. My phone buzzed. Email from Marcus Hale. Subject title chain update. Urgent. I didn't open it yet. I wasn't ready. I needed to survive dinner first. Dinner was a performance art piece. My parents had invited a few neighbors over, presumably to show off the fact that both their daughters were in town. We sat around the dining table, eating takeout sushi from the most expensive place in town, another expense I assumed would end up on a credit card they planned to pay off with my money. "So, Ivy," Mr. Thompson from next door asked, pouring himself a glass of wine. "How is Seattle still raining?" "It is great," I said, picking at a tuna roll. "Market is strong." "Actually," my father interrupted, leaning back in his chair and swirling his wine glass, "Ivy is making some big moves. She is selling that old craftsman of hers, moving up in the world. Right, honey?" I froze. My fork hovered halfway to my mouth. "Oh, Mr. Thompson looked interested. "I thought you loved that house. You spent 3 years restoring it." "She did," Charles continued, answering for me. "But you know, it was a lot of maintenance for a single girl. And the neighborhood. Well, it is changing. Ivy is looking at a luxury condo downtown. Something with a doorman. Something that fits her new vibe. More executive. Less rustic." I looked at my father. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the neighbors, gauging their reaction, feeding them a story that made him look like the father of a high-powered, upwardly mobile daughter, rather than the father of a fraud victim. "Is that true, Ivy?" Mrs. Thompson asked. I slowly lowered my fork. "The house is being sold," I said. My voice was steady, but underneath the table, my hands were clenched into fists. "The transaction is closing soon." "See?" Charles beamed. "Smart girl, always knowing when to liquidate an asset." Liquidate, that word again. I looked across the table at my mother. She was avoiding my eyes, busying herself with stacking empty soy sauce dishes. Next to her elbow, partially covered by a napkin, was a stack of mail. I saw the corner of an envelope. It had the logo of the Redstone Hills Credit Union, and below it, peeking out just barely, was a letterhead I recognized. Swift and Hart title and escrow. I reached out. "Mom, is that mail for me?" Linda's hand shot out like a cobra. She snatched the stack of papers and shoved them onto her lap, knocking over the salt shaker in the process. "No," she said, her laugh shrill and brittle. "Just bills, honey, boring utility bills. You are on vacation, no paperwork allowed. I will handle everything." "You just relax. It looked like a title company logo," I said, locking eyes with her. "You are seeing things," she said, her smile tight enough to snap a violin string. "It is just junk mail, more sushi." The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of white noise. I excused myself as soon as the neighbors left, claiming jet lag. I found Jade in the sunroom. She was sitting on the wicker sofa, scrolling through her phone, the blue light illuminating her face. She looked young, innocent. For a second, I felt a pang of the old protectiveness. She was my baby sister. Maybe she really didn't know. Maybe she believed the lie about the condo, too. "Hey," I said, stepping into the room. "Oh, hey," Jade said, not looking up. "Did you see the hashtag Jade and Ryan? Forever is trending locally. We have 2,000 interactions already." "That is great," I said. I sat down on the ottoman opposite her. "Jade, we need to talk." "If it is about the budget, Mom said you are handling it," she said, finally looking up with a pout. "Don't stress me out, Ivy. I have a pimple coming in on my chin and stress makes it worse." "It is not about the budget," I said. "It is about the house." "What house?" "My house. In Seattle." She blinked. "Oh, the condo thing Dad said you were upgrading. That is cool. Can I have the guest room key when I visit? I want to go shopping at Nordstrom." I watched her face closely. I was looking for a micro-expression, a twitch, a sign of guilt. "Jade," I said softly, "what if I told you I wasn't upgrading? What if I told you that Mom and Dad sold my house without asking me? using a fake signature, to pay for this wedding. Jade laughed. It was a genuine, dismissive laugh. "You are so dramatic, Ivy," she said, rolling her eyes. "Seriously, you always do this. You make up these crazy scenarios in your head because you like being the martyr. Why would they sell your house? They have the cabin money." "The cabin didn't sell," I said. "Yes, it did," she insisted. "Mom told me that is where the cash came from. Stop trying to ruin my vibe with your paranoia. You are just jealous because for once, I am the center of attention and you are just the checkbook." She stood up, smoothing her silk robe. "I am going to bed. I need my beauty sleep. We have a 600 a.m. wake-up call for yoga." She walked past me, leaving a trail of expensive vanilla scent in her wake. I sat there in the dark sunroom for a long time. She had been given a chance to ask a question, to show concern, to look at the reality, and she had chosen the comfortable lie. I pulled out my phone and opened the email from Marcus. "Ivy, I have the preliminary trace. It is worse than we thought. The power of attorney was recertified by a notary named Sarah Jenkins 2 weeks ago. She is the cousin of the loan officer at the credit union. It is a tight circle, but here's the kicker. I traced the disbursement instructions. The proceeds from the sale, $742,000 after fees, are not going into your parents' joint account. They are routed to a newly opened trust account, the JCR Family Trust. Signatories on the account are 1. Charles Lopez, 2. Linda Harper, 3. Jade Lopez Ivy. Your name is not on the trust, but Jade's is. She had to sign a signature card to open that account. She walked into a bank, showed ID, and signed for a trust that was funded solely by the sale of your home. She knows. She is not just a beneficiary, she is a participant. I have the draft complaint ready. Just say the word. Love, Marcus. I stared at the screen until the letters started to swim. Jade signed the card. She stood in that sunroom 2 minutes ago and told me I was dramatic. She told me I was jealous. And all the while, she knew exactly where the money was coming from because she had signed her name next to my parents' names on the account that caught the windfall. The JCR Family Trust. Jade, Charles, Ryan. Or maybe just Jade, Charles, and the imaginary version of Linda. It didn't matter. What mattered was the missing I. I walked out of the sunroom and into the kitchen. My mother was there, loading the dishwasher. She hummed a little tune, looking content. "Ivy," she said, startled. "You are still up. You should sleep. Big day tomorrow." "I couldn't sleep," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "Well, warm milk helps," she said, turning back to the sink. "You know, Ivy, I was thinking at dinner, having you here, able to help us like this, it really proves something." "What does it prove?" I asked. "That family is everything," she said, wiping a counter that was already clean. "You are so successful, so independent. But you wouldn't be where you are without us, right? We pushed you, we gave you that drive, and now you are giving back. It is the circle of life." "Giving back," I repeated. "Is that what this is?" "Of course," she said, turning to smile at me. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was the smile of a woman who had convinced herself that theft was actually a form of love. "We are all in this together. What is yours is ours, and what is ours is yours. That is how we survive." "Right," I said. "Survival." I turned and walked away before I said something that would tip my hand. I went out the back sliding glass door onto the deck. The backyard was transformed. Thousands of fairy lights were strung up in the trees, ready for the rehearsal dinner tomorrow night. Tables were set up with white linens. It looked magical. It looked expensive. It looked like my house in Seattle, liquefied and sprayed over a lawn in Colorado. I walked to the edge of the balcony and looked down at the main breaker box for the outdoor electrical system attached to the side of the house. If I pulled that lever, the lights would go out, the darkness would return, the fantasy would end. If I sent the email to Marcus, the lights would go out on their entire lives, The police would come. The accounts would freeze. The shame would be public and permanent. I stood there, shivering in the cool mountain air. For 34 years, I had been afraid of the dark. I had been afraid of their disapproval. I had been afraid of being alone. But as I looked at those lights, burning with the energy paid for by my stolen labor, I realized something. I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. I was afraid of the light this false, blinding, artificial light that hid the rot underneath. "Are you brave enough?" I whispered to the night. "Are you brave enough to ruin the party?" I looked at the text from Marcus again. She is a participant. I took a deep breath. The scent of sage and deception filled my lungs. "Yes," I said. "I am. I didn't pull the physical breaker. That would be too easy. That would just be a power outage." I went back inside, climbed the stairs to the guest room, and opened my laptop. I replied to Marcus with 2 words: "Execute it." Then I turned off the light and lay in the dark, listening to the silence of a house that was about to scream. My childhood bedroom had not changed since 2008. The walls were still painted a shade of lavender that I had insisted upon when I was 15. A color that now looked less like teenage rebellion and more like a bruise under the yellow light of the ceiling fan. A faded poster of a band I hadn't listened to in a decade peeled slightly at the corner. On the bookshelf, my high school debate trophies gathered dust next to a stack of paperback novels. I sat cross-legged on the twin bed, the springs creaking beneath me, my laptop balanced on a pillow. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. Outside, the house was silent, save for the occasional settling groan of the floorboards. My parents were asleep down the hall, likely dreaming of the social coup they were about to pull off. Jade was in the guest suite, dreaming of her hashtag, and I was on a secure Zoom call with a forensic accountant and a state prosecutor. The face of Marcus Hale filled my screen. He looked tired, his tie loosened, a mug of black coffee in his hand. Behind him, the glass walls of his Seattle office reflected the city lights, the city where I no longer technically owned a home. "Okay, Ivy," Marcus said, his voice low but crystal clear through my AirPods. "We have gone through the preliminary discovery. We have the chain of title. We have the bank routing numbers. We have everything we need to blow this up. The question now is when we detonate." He adjusted his glasses and held up 2 fingers. "Option A," he said. "We file an emergency injunction right now. I wake up a judge in King County. We slap a lis pendens on the property title. The sale stops dead. The money never moves. Your parents get a frantic call from the title company in the morning telling them the deal is dead due to a cloud on the title." I stared at the screen. "And then what?" "Then," Marcus continued, "your parents spin it. They will tell everyone it was a clerical error. They will tell you they were just trying to surprise you by managing your assets. They will play the victim. They will say the big bad bank made a mistake. You get your house back. But the narrative gets muddy. They escape the consequences because the crime was never fully consummated." I nodded slowly. I knew that playbook. I had lived inside that playbook for 34 years. If I stopped them now, Linda would cry. She would say she was only trying to help. She would say I was ungrateful for making a scene over a misunderstanding. Charles would laugh it off as a technical glitch. "Option B," Marcus said, and his expression hardened. We let it close. The air in the lavender room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Explain," I said. "We let the wire hit the account," Marcus said. "The moment those funds transfer from the buyer's escrow account into the JCR Family Trust, the crime of wire fraud is complete. It moves from attempted to committed. At that exact second, my contact at the district attorney's office, who is listening in right now, by the way, executes a pre-authorized freeze on the receiving account." A third window on the Zoom call unmuted. It was a woman with a sharp bob cut and a background that looked like a government office. "Ms. Lopez," the woman said. Her name was distinct on the screen. "G. Investigator Miller. I have been trying to nail Swift and Hart title for 3 years. They have been facilitating predatory transfers using questionable power of attorney documents for the elderly and the absent. But we never had a clean victim. We never had someone willing to testify against their own blood. You are the key. If we go with option B, Marcus interjected, your house is technically sold for about 48 hours. It will be messy to unwind. But the money, your $780,000, will be trapped. Your parents will think they have the cash. They will try to spend it, and the card will decline, and then the subpoenas arrive. I looked away from the screen. I looked at the corkboard above my desk, where a picture of me and Jade from a family vacation hung. We were smiling, sunburnt, standing on a beach. I was 12. She was 6. I was holding her hand so she wouldn't get knocked over by the waves. If we do this, I said, my voice sounding hollow in the small room, if we let the money move, it is a felony. It is not a family dispute anymore. It is prison time. It is Class 3 felony theft and wire fraud. Investigator Miller confirmed. Depending on the judge, and given the amount is over $100,000, we are looking at mandatory minimums. Probation is unlikely for the ringleader. I felt a wave of nausea. Was I really doing this? Was I sitting in the room where I learned to read? Plotting to send my mother to jail, Ivy. Marcus said softly. Look at the file I just sent you. I clicked the link in the chat box. It opened a folder of evidence Marcus had compiled in the last 6 hours. Item 1. A spreadsheet of my transfers to the wedding planner. $112,450. Item 2. An email from Linda dated 6 months ago. Subject bridge loan. The body read, we promise. Ivy. As soon as the cabin sells, you get every penny back plus interest. We would never ask if it wasn't for Jade. Item 3. A screenshot of a text message from Jade to a friend. Obtained via a subpoena of the cloud data associated with the trust account creation. I zoomed in on the text. Jade lol. Ivy thinks she is paying for the wedding. Little does she know she is paying for my honeymoon and the down payment on our new house. Mom is a genius. Seattle money. I read it twice. Little does she know, they were laughing at me, while I was working 60-hour weeks, while I was skipping vacations to save, while I was stressing over their happiness. They were texting about how stupid I was. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a resource. I was a vein of gold they had found in the backyard, to be mined until it was empty. I opened the drawer of the nightstand. There was a notepad there. I took a pen and wrote a single sentence. I didn't know who I was writing it for. Maybe for the 18-year-old girl who signed that power of attorney. From this point forward, I am not paying to cover up their mistakes. I am paying to expose them. There is one more thing, Investigator Miller said. We pulled the security footage from the notary's office. Swift and Hart has cameras in the lobby. We wanted to verify who was present at the signing of the recertified power of attorney. She shared her screen. A grainy black and white video started to play. I saw my mother, Linda. She was wearing her business suit, the one she wore when she wanted to intimidate a manager. She was signing a document with a flourish, and sitting next to her, looking bored, scrolling on her phone, was Jade. Then, the notary, a woman with frizzy hair, handed a paper to Jade. Jade laughed, took a sip of what looked like a latte, and signed as a witness. That is the affidavit of identity, Marcus explained, his voice devoid of emotion. Jade signed a legal document swearing that she had spoken to you and that you confirmed the power of attorney was valid. She lied under oath. Ivy. She is not just a beneficiary, she is a co-conspirator. I watched the video loop. I watched my little sister, the one I had held upright in the waves, sign away my home while drinking a coffee. She didn't look hesitant. She didn't look coerced. She looked like she was running an errand. She knew, I whispered. She knew the whole time. She is 30 years old. Ivy, Marcus said. She is not a child. She made a choice. I closed my eyes. I thought about the rehearsal dinner tomorrow, the lights, the speeches, the lies. If I stopped this now, they would learn nothing. They would wait a year, find another loophole, and do it again. Maybe next time it would be my retirement account. Maybe next time they would take out a credit card in my name. Or maybe They would do it to someone else. Miller, I said, opening my eyes. If we let this go through, can we guarantee the funds are frozen before they can spend a dime? We have a flag on the routing number, Miller said. The second the Federal Reserve clears the batch, we lock the account. They will get the deposit received notification, but the available balance will be zero within minutes. They won't know until they try to swipe a card. Do it, I said. You are sure? Marcus asked. Once we pull this trigger, Ivy, you can't unpull it. You are inviting the state into your living room. I am not protecting my property anymore. Marcus, I said, looking at the video of Jade one last time. I am protecting the next person they try to con. If they get away with this, they will never stop. I have enabled them for too long. The Bank of Ivy is closed. Okay, Miller said. Operation is a go. We will let the closing finalize tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. My team will be on site at the wedding venue by 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We will serve the warrants immediately following the ceremony. No, I said. Not after. Excuse me, Miller asked. Serve them during, I said. Serve them when everyone is watching. They wanted a spectacle. They wanted to be the center of attention. Let them have it. That is unconventional, Miller said, but I could hear the grim satisfaction in her voice. It is justice, I said. Marcus looked at me through the screen. He looked proud and sad. Get some sleep, Ivy, he said. Tomorrow is going to be the longest day of your life. I won't sleep, I said. I have to write a speech for the rehearsal dinner. Ivy. Don't worry, I said, a cold smile touching my lips for the first time. I am going to be the perfect sister. I am going to play my part until the curtain drops. All right, Marcus said. I will see you tomorrow. I am flying in on the red-eye. I will be there before the first appetizer is served. Marcus. Yeah. Make sure you bring the original certified copies of the fraud complaint. I said. I want to hand it to my father myself. Consider it done, he said. Tomorrow. They are going to think they won the lottery. Let them celebrate. Let them toast. Let them dance. He paused, leaning closer to the camera. Because that will be the last party they ever throw with money that doesn't belong to them. The screen went black. I sat in the silence of my room. I looked at the lavender walls. I looked at the debate trophies. I looked at the bed where I used to dream about growing up and getting away. I had gotten away. I had built a life, and they had tried to steal it back. I closed the laptop. I walked to the window and looked out at the backyard. The fairy lights were off now, waiting for tomorrow. Enjoy the dark, I whispered to the silent house, because the lightning is coming. The morning sun hit the window of my childhood bedroom with a cheerful, aggressive brightness that felt entirely inappropriate for the crime that was about to be committed. It was Friday, the day before the wedding, the day my parents believed they were going to become rich, and the day I knew they were going to become felons. I lay in bed, the duvet pulled up to my chin, listening to the sounds of them getting ready down the hall. I heard the zip of a dress, the clacking of my mother's heels, and the heavy thud of my father's dress shoes. They were dressing for a closing, but they were telling me they were dressing for a meeting with the wedding planner. Ivy, honey, Linda's voice came through the door, muffled and sickeningly sweet. We are heading out to meet with the planner to finalize the seating chart. We will be back by noon. Sleep in. You look exhausted. Okay, Mom, I called out, my voice thick with fake sleepiness. Have fun? I waited until I heard the front door close and the engine of the leased SUV fade down the driveway. Then, I sat up and opened my laptop. I did not go back to sleep. I logged into a secure server link that Investigator Miller had sent me at 3 a.m. The screen flickered to life. It was a high-definition feed from a security camera mounted in the corner of a conference room at Swift & Hart Title and Escrow. The room was generic, filled with fake plants and motivational posters about home and dreams, and there they were. Charles was wearing his navy blazer, the one with the gold buttons that he thought made him look like a yacht owner. Linda was wearing a cream-colored suit and her best pearls. They didn't look like desperate people stealing their daughter's home. They looked like the picture of successful upper-middle-class stability. I watched as the escrow officer, a woman with a tired face and a stack of files, walked in. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Lopez," the woman said. The audio was crisp. Miller had clearly tapped the room thoroughly. "We are all set to close on the Seattle property. Do you have the original power of attorney?" "Right here," Linda said, reaching into her designer bag, a bag I knew was a knockoff, and pulling out the yellowed 16-year-old document I had signed before freshman orientation. "Wonderful," the officer said. She didn't even squint at it. She just checked the notary stamp from the recertification Jade had witnessed 2 weeks ago. "And Ivy is aware of the final numbers." "Oh, absolutely," Linda said, laughing lightly. She waved a manicured hand. "Ivy is so busy with her promotion. She just told us to handle the grunt work. She is actually upgrading. Moving into a luxury condo in downtown Seattle. This old house just didn't fit her vibe anymore. Too much yard work for a high-powered executive." I stared at the screen. Didn't fit her vibe. That house was my soul. I had sanded those floors on my hands and knees. I had planted the hydrangeas in the front yard. And here was my mother, reducing my sanctuary to a lifestyle mismatch to charm a title clerk. "That is exciting for her," the officer said, pushing a stack of papers across the mahogany table. "Well, let's get you funded. Sign here, here, and here." I watched my father pick up the pen. He didn't hesitate. He didn't shake. He signed Charles Lopez with a flourish. Right next to the line that authorized the sale of the property located at 2409 Queen Anne Avenue North. Linda signed next, Ivy Lopez, by attorney-in-fact Linda Harper. It was done. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a notification from the family group chat. "Jade guys, did you get the check yet? I need a photo for the smart investing highlight reel on my profile. Make sure the amount is visible but blur the account number. Obviously, Empire Building." I looked at the timestamp. Jade wasn't at the title company. She was at Willowcrest Vineyard for her final hair and makeup trial. I opened Instagram on my phone and found her profile. She was live. There she was, sitting in a director's chair, a makeup artist dusting powder onto her nose. She was talking to her camera, her voice bubbly and bright. "So yeah, my sister is finally making some big moves." Jade was saying to her 40,000 followers, "She is selling her starter home to level up. It is honestly so inspiring to see the family portfolio growing. We are all about that abundance mindset today." Starter home. I looked back at the laptop screen. The escrow officer was shaking my father's hand. "Congratulations," the officer said. "The wire transfer has been initiated. $742,000 should hit your account within the hour." "Excellent," Charles said, checking his watch. "Just in time for lunch." I closed the laptop. I couldn't watch them celebrate. The mechanism was in motion now. The money was moving through the digital veins of the banking system. It was leaving the buyer's account, traveling through the Federal Reserve Clearinghouse, and landing in the JCR Family Trust account at the Redstone Hills Credit Union. And waiting for it, like a predator in the tall grass, was the freeze order Investigator Miller had placed on that specific routing number. I imagined the digital collision. The money would arrive, triggering a deposit received alert on my father's phone. He would see the balance jump. He would feel the rush of dopamine. But the second he tried to touch it, the steel trap would snap shut. I went into the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. I expected to see a victim. I expected to see a woman broken by betrayal. But I didn't. I looked clear. For the first time in my life, I wasn't scrambling to fix a disaster. I wasn't transferring funds from my savings to cover an overdraft. I wasn't lying to a landlord. I was simply the observer. I had handed the controls over to the state of Colorado, and the weight was off my shoulders. I walked downstairs to the kitchen. I made a pot of coffee. I sat at the island and waited. 40 minutes later, the front door opened. "We are back," Linda called out, her voice singing with adrenaline. They walked into the kitchen looking like they had just won the lottery. Charles was practically bouncing on the balls of his feet. Linda's cheeks were flushed. "Hey," I said, blowing on my mug. How was the planner? Oh, fantastic, Charles said, rubbing his hands together. Productive, very productive. We sorted out the logistics. And the seating chart, I asked. Done and dusted, Linda said, opening the fridge and pulling out a bottle of sparkling water. Everything is under control, Ivy. You worry too much. My father pulled out his phone. He was frowning slightly at the screen. That is odd, he muttered. What is it? Linda asked, her head snapping toward him with the alertness of a bird of prey. I am trying to wire the final $3,000 to the florist, Charles said, tapping the screen aggressively. It says, transaction declined, code 05. Try it again, Linda said, her voice tightening. The money is there. I saw the alert. I am trying, Charles snapped. It must be the signal in here, or maybe the bank's app is down for maintenance. You know how glitchy small credit unions can be. Use the other card, Linda suggested. The other card is maxed out. Linda, he hissed, lowering his voice, but not enough. We need to use the new liquidity. I took a sip of coffee. Is everything okay? I asked, keeping my voice flat. Fine, they both said in unison. Just a technical glitch, Charles said, sweating slightly. I will call the bank later. They probably just have a hold on large transfers until they verify the source. Standard procedure for high net worth transactions. High net worth. He loved the sound of that. Suddenly, Linda's phone pinged. It wasn't a text. It was the distinct chime of an email. She pulled it out of her pocket. I watched her face closely. Her brow furrowed. She squinted at the screen. What is this? She mumbled. State Department of Regulatory Agencies. My heart skipped a beat. Miller was moving fast. What does it say? Charles asked, distracted by his frozen banking app. Something about an inquiry into a power of attorney usage, Linda said, reading the subject line. She swiped it away with a scoff. Probably spam, or some automated confirm from the title company. Honestly, the amount of paperwork they make you do these days is ridiculous. She put the phone down on the counter. Screen down. She chose not to read it. She chose to believe that the universe wouldn't dare interrupt her victory lap. Ivy, Linda said, turning to me with a smile that was now fueled by $700,000 of imaginary money. I have some good news. Your father and we have been moving some assets around, and we think we are going to be able to help you pay off that mortgage of yours in Seattle sooner than you think. I looked at her. The audacity was breathtaking. She was offering to pay off my mortgage with the proceeds from selling the very house the mortgage was attached to. It was a snake eating its own tail, and she expected me to thank her for the meal. Really? I said. That is generous. Well, family takes care of family, she said, reaching out to pat my cheek. Her hand was cold. We just want you to be free of debt, so you can start fresh. Start fresh. I appreciate that. Mom, I said, and I meant it. I was going to start fresh. Just not the way she thought. I stood up. I am going to go check on my dress, I said. I want to make sure it is steamed for the rehearsal dinner. Good idea, Charles said, still tapping furiously at his phone. We have the dinner at 6. Wear something nice. We have to look prosperous. I walked out of the kitchen. As I climbed the stairs, I heard Charles's voice rise in panic. Linda, it still isn't going through. It says, account frozen. Contact law enforcement. What does that mean? Don't be dramatic, Charles, Linda snapped. It probably means contact the branch manager. I will call them after lunch. Just put the flowers on the emergency Amex. I reached the top of the stairs and walked into my room. I closed the door and leaned against it. I waited for the shaking to start. Usually, after a confrontation with them, I would be trembling. I would be second-guessing myself. I would be wondering if I was being too harsh. But my hands were steady. My heartbeat was slow. I felt light. I realized then that the heaviest thing I'd been carrying wasn't the financial burden. It was the hope. The hope that they would change. The hope that they loved me enough to stop. That hope was dead now, and with it went the anxiety. My phone buzzed. It was a blocked number. I answered it on the first ring. "Ms. Lopez," Investigator Miller's voice said. "It is done. The closing is recorded with the county. The funds hit the JCR Trust at 10:14 in the morning. The freeze was executed at 10:15. "Did they try to move it?" I asked. "Yes," Miller said. 3 attempts in the last 10 minutes. 1 to a florist, 1 to a Mercedes dealership, and 1 to a travel agent for a Maldives upgrade. All declined. "They think it is a glitch," I said. "They won't think that for long," Miller said. "We have a team in position. We are ready to execute the arrest warrants at the venue tomorrow. But I need to confirm one last time. Once we step onto that property, there is no taking it back. It will be public. It will be in the papers." I walked to the window. I looked out at the driveway where my parents' leased car sat, shining in the sun. I thought about Jade's live stream. I thought about the starter home comment. "Ms. Lopez," Miller asked, "do you want to proceed?" "I will be there," I said. "We will see you at the ceremony," Miller said. "Wait," I said. "One request." "Go ahead." "Don't come in until the objection," I said. "You know the part. If anyone has any just cause why these two should not be joined together." Miller paused. I could hear a faint, professional smile in her voice. "That is dramatic. Ms. Lopez." "My family loves drama," I said. "I am just giving them the grand finale they paid for." "Understood," Miller said. "See you tomorrow." I hung up the phone. I went to the closet and pulled out my maid of honor dress. It was a pale pink, a color I hated, chosen by Jade because she said it made me look soft. I held it up against my body in the mirror. Tomorrow, I wouldn't look soft. Tomorrow, I would look like the person who owned the house, the checkbook, and the truth. I carefully hung the dress back up. Then I went to my laptop and printed out a single document, the closing statement with the fake signature. I folded it into a small square and put it in my pocket. The rehearsal dinner was tonight. Tonight, I had to play the role of the loving sister one last time. I had to smile. I had to toast. I had to watch them clink glasses and celebrate their theft. And I would do it, because I knew that while they were toasting to their smart investment, the ink on their arrest warrants was already dry. The rehearsal dinner was held at the Summit Club, the kind of establishment that charged $30 for a plate of pasta simply because they sprinkled a flake of gold leaf on top. The room smelled of truffle oil, expensive cologne, and the distinct, metallic scent of social climbing. I stood near a pillar wrapped in white chiffon, holding a glass of sparkling water that I had no intention of drinking. Around me, the cream of Redstone Hill society mingled. These were people who leased their luxury cars and carried credit card balances that rivaled the national debt, yet they walked with the confidence of aristocrats. "Jade looks absolutely stunning," Mrs. Galloway, the town's leading gossip and real estate agent, cooed as she drifted past me. "And you, Ivy, it is so noble of you to step up. Everyone is saying you are practically the fairy godmother of this event." "Fairy godmother," I repeated, the words tasting like ash. "That implies magic, Mrs. Galloway. This was mostly just wire transfers." She laughed, tapping my arm with her manicured hand, assuming I was being modest. She had no idea that the magic she admired was actually grand larceny committed by the parents of the bride. At the head table, Jade tapped a silver spoon against her champagne flute. The room fell into a hush. She stood up, her silk rehearsal dress shimmering under the crystal chandeliers. She looked perfect. She looked like a princess. She looked like someone who had never heard the word consequences in her entire life. "Hi, everyone," Jade said, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. She looked at Ryan, her fiancé, who was checking his watch, and then she looked at the room. Finally, her gaze landed on me. "I just want to say something before we start the speeches," Jade said, pressing a hand to her chest. "Most of you know that planning a wedding is stressful. But I have been so lucky. I have the best parents in the world, obviously, but I also have the most amazing sister. She gestured to me. A spotlight, which I hadn't realized was programmed for this moment, swung around and blinded me. Ivy, Jade said, wiping a tear that may or may not have been real. You are my rock. You are the backbone of this family. You stepped up when things got tight, and you made sure my dream came true without asking for a single thing in return. You are the best investment this family ever made. Applause broke out. People turned to beam at me. My father, Charles, raised his glass high, looking the picture of a proud patriarch. My mother, Linda, blew me a kiss, the best investment. That was all I was to them. I was a bond that had matured. I was an asset to be liquidated. I smiled. It was the hardest physical action I had ever performed. I nodded, accepting the applause, while in my head, I was watching a different scene. I was watching a clock tick down. 19 hours until the ceremony, 19 hours until the warrants. As the applause died down and the waiters began serving the lobster bisque, I watched my father make his way to the bar. He was playing the big man, as always. He loudly announced that the next round of drinks was on him, specifically a bottle of 50-year-old scotch for the groomsmen. I moved slightly closer, staying in the shadows of the pillar. I needed to see this. Charles pulled out his platinum card. The heavy metal one he liked to drop on tables to make a clattering sound. He handed it to the bartender with a flourish. The bartender, a young man with a ponytail, swiped the card. A sharp, electronic beep cut through the ambient chatter. The bartender frowned and swiped it again. Beep? System must be slow tonight, Charles announced loudly, laughing. Too many high rollers in one room, right? He pulled out a second card, a blue rewards card. Swipe, beep. The laughter in Charles's voice faltered. The back of his neck began to turn a deep, angry red. Try this one, he said, his voice lower, handing over a third card. This was the corporate card for his consulting business, a business that hadn't consulted on anything in 3 years. Swipe, beep, declined. The bartender looked uncomfortable. I am sorry, sir. The terminal is giving me a refer to issuer code. Do you have cash? It is a glitch, Charles snapped, snatching the cards back. I just transferred nearly $1 million into these accounts this morning. Your machine is broken. I can try another terminal, the bartender offered. But before he could, a hand landed on Charles's shoulder. It was Mr. Moretti, the owner of the Summit Club. He was a short, stout man who did not become the owner of the town's most exclusive venue by letting people drink on credit. Charles, Mr. Moretti said, his voice low but carrying perfectly to where I stood. Can I have a word? My office got a call from our merchant processor about your authorization hold for tomorrow's reception. Not now. Tony, Charles hissed. I am in the middle of a toast. We need to secure the funds. Charles, Moretti said, his grip tightening. The processor said there is a freeze on the routing number you provided. If we don't get a valid payment by tonight, I cannot open the kitchen tomorrow. My staff needs to be paid. I saw Linda freeze at the table. She had been watching Charles at the bar. Her radar for social humiliation was sharper than anyone's. She stood up abruptly, smoothing her skirt, and rushed over to where Charles and Mr. Moretti were standing. Is there a problem? Linda asked, her smile fixed and terrifying. Just a technical misunderstanding, Charles said, sweating profusely. The bank is flagging the large transfer I made today for security. You know how it is. Tony? Linda said, placing a hand on the owner's arm. We have been members here for 20 years. You know we are good for it. The money is there. We just sold a property in Seattle. It is a cash flow timing issue. I respect that, Linda, Moretti said. But business is business. I need $20,000 as a security deposit tonight, or I have to cancel the staff for tomorrow. Linda's face went pale. She looked at Charles. Charles looked at his shoes. They had $742,000 sitting in an account, and they couldn't buy a bottle of water with it. Linda turned. Her eyes scanned the room frantically until they locked on me. She walked over to me. Her pace was fast, aggressive. She grabbed my elbow and pulled me toward a quiet alcove near the restrooms. "Ivy," she whispered, her voice tight, "we have a small situation." "I saw," I said, taking a sip of my water. "Dad's cards are declining. Again." "It is the bank," she said quickly. "They put a hold on the transfer from the house sale. Just a 24-hour security thing, but Moretti is being a jerk. He wants a deposit now." "That is unfortunate," I said. "Ivy," she said, squeezing my arm, "I need you to write a check, just for $20,000. We will wire it back to you on Monday morning as soon as the bank opens. You know the money is there. You know we sold the house." I looked at her. She was asking me to pay the deposit for a party that was being funded by the theft of my own home. She wanted me to use my salary to bridge the gap between her crime and her payout. "The house?" I said. "You mean my house?" Linda blinked. A flicker of panic crossed her eyes, but she buried it instantly under a layer of denial. "Our house," she corrected. "The family asset. Look, we can discuss the technicalities of the title later. Right now, your sister is about to be humiliated. Do you want the venue to cancel? Do you want Jade to walk down the aisle of a closed restaurant?" "Maybe," I said. Linda recoiled as if I had slapped her. "How can you be so selfish after everything we have done for you? We raised you. We supported you." "You sold my house. Mom," I said. My voice was quiet, but it was hard as granite. "You forged my signature. You used a power of attorney from when I was 18. Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" "We didn't forge anything," she hissed, looking around to make sure no one was listening. "You signed that power of attorney. It is legal, and we are going to pay you back. We are going to pay off your mortgage. Remember, we are doing this for you, to simplify your life." "Simplify my life," I repeated, "by making me homeless." "You are not homeless," she snapped. "You have a good job. You can rent. People rent all the time. Stop being so dramatic. Now, are you going to write the check or not?" Before I could answer, Jade appeared. She had sensed the shift in the atmosphere. "What is going on?" Jade demanded, looking between us. "Why is Mom crying, Ivy? What did you say to her?" "I am not crying," Linda lied, wiping a dry eye. "Your sister is just hesitating. Mr. Moretti needs a deposit because of the bank glitch, and Ivy is refusing to help." Jade turned on me, her face twisting into a scowl that ruined her perfect makeup. "Are you serious, Ivy?" she asked. "Now, you are doing this now. Ryan's parents are watching. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is?" "It is embarrassing that Dad's cards are declined," I said. "That has nothing to do with me." "It has everything to do with you," Jade said, her voice rising. "You are the one with the liquid cash. You are the one who is supposed to handle this. Why do you always have to make everything so difficult? You did this on purpose, didn't you? You waited until tonight to make a scene because you are jealous." "Jealous of what, Jade?" I asked. "Jealous that you are marrying a man whose parents you are trying to impress with stolen money?" "Stop saying stolen." Jade stomped her foot. It was a childish gesture, but in her bridal heels, it looked dangerous. "It is family money. We are a family. Why can't you just be a part of the team for once?" "The team," I said. "Jade, you signed the signature card for the trust account. You know exactly where that money came from." Jade froze. Her eyes darted to Linda, then back to me. "I don't know what you are talking about," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I just signed what Dad told me to sign. I trust them, unlike you." "That is the difference between us," I said. "You trust them to give you money. I trusted them not to take it." "Just give us the check, Ivy," Linda pleaded, switching tactics from anger to desperation. "Please, for the family name. We will lose everything if this gets out." I looked at them. My mother, desperate to keep the mask on. My sister, willing to believe the lie as long as it paid for her party. "I don't have my checkbook," I lied. "You have your phone," Linda said. "You can do a wire transfer. It takes 2 seconds." I looked at my phone. I looked at the time. "I can't do that," I said. "Why not?" Jade demanded. "Because," I said, leaning in close so only they could hear me. Tomorrow, when the sun comes up, we will see who really owes who, and until then, I am not spending another dime on this charade. I hate you, Jade whispered. If you ruin this wedding, I will never forgive you. That is a risk I have analyzed, I said, and I am willing to accept the exposure. I turned to walk away. Where are you going? Linda called after me, her voice cracking. You can't leave. I need some air, I said. I walked away from the alcove, leaving them standing there, two women in expensive clothes, trapped in a cage of their own making. I headed toward the exit, my heart pounding. I had done it. I had refused. I had broken the pattern. As I pushed through the heavy oak doors of the club and stepped out into the cool night air, I saw a car pull into the valet circle. It was a nondescript rental sedan, generic and gray. The door opened, and a man stepped out. He was wearing a dark suit, no tie, and he looked like he hadn't slept in 24 hours. Marcus. He spotted me immediately. He didn't wave. He just walked toward me, his stride long and purposeful. He looked out of place among the luxury SUVs and the valet attendants in their red vests. He looked like the law. You made it, I said as he reached me. I told you I would, Marcus said. He didn't hug me. He scanned the parking lot, his eyes checking the perimeter. Miller is here too. She's in the van parked down the street. She wanted to make sure the parents didn't try to run if the credit card declines spooked them. They are spooked, I said. My dad's cards are dead. The owner demanded a deposit. Linda just asked me for $20,000. Did you give it to her? Marcus asked, looking at me intensely. No. Marcus let out a breath he seemed to have been holding since Seattle. Good, because if you had, it would have complicated the victim's statement. He took my arm and led me away from the entrance, toward the shadows of the parking lot where the fairy lights from the trees didn't quite reach. Ivy, he said, his voice low. We are at the point of no return. Miller has the judge's signature. The warrants are active. The freezing order is absolute. Tomorrow, at the ceremony. This ends. He turned me to face him. His hands were warm on my shoulders. I need to ask you one last time, he said. Not as your lawyer, but as the man who loves you. Are you sure you are about to drop a nuclear bomb on your family? You will be the girl who had her parents arrested at a wedding. That label sticks. Are you ready to carry that? I looked past him, toward the glow of the venue. I could hear the muffled sound of music. They were playing We Are Family. The irony was so sharp it could cut glass. I thought about the house in Seattle. I thought about the lavender room. I thought about the way Linda looked at me when she asked for the money not with love, but with calculation. They sold my home, Marcus, I said. But that isn't even the worst part. The worst part is that they expected me to applaud them for it. They expected me to be grateful that they robbed me. I looked up at the fairy lights twinkling in the trees. They were beautiful, and they were fake. Just glass and gas and electricity. If I stop this now, I said, my voice steady. If I rescue them one more time, I don't just lose the house. I lose the ability to ever say no again. I become their property, forever. I looked back at Marcus. If I withdraw the complaint, I lose the only home I have left, I said, which is myself. I am not willing to sell that. Marcus nodded. He pulled me into a hug, holding me tight against the cold. Okay, he said into my hair. Then let's go back inside. You have a toast to give, and I have a front row seat to secure for the prosecutor. One more night, I whispered. One more night, he agreed. And then, you are free. We walked back toward the light, hand in hand, ready to play our parts in the final act of the tragedy of the Lopez family. The house was quiet, but it was the kind of silence that felt heavy, like the air before a tornado touches down. I was lying in my bed, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars that were still stuck to the ceiling from 1999. I was trying to count them, trying to quiet the racing thoughts in my mind, when a soft knock rattled the door. It was not the aggressive pounding of my mother. It was the tentative, rhythmic tap of my sister. Ivy. Jade's voice was muffled through the wood. Are you awake? Can I come in? I sat up and pulled the duvet around my shoulders. I considered pretending to be asleep. I considered telling her to go away. But I knew this moment was inevitable. The confrontation at the rehearsal dinner had been a skirmish. This was going to be the negotiation. Come in, I said. The door creaked open. Jade slipped inside, closing it softly behind her. She was wearing a white silk robe with feathers on the cuffs, part of her bridal trousseau, that had cost $600. Her hair was wrapped in a silk bonnet, and her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, revealing the smattering of freckles across her nose that she usually covered with foundation. For a second, she looked like the little sister I used to read bedtime stories to. She looked small. She looked young. She didn't sit on the bed. She hovered by the door, hugging her arms around herself. I couldn't sleep, she said, her voice wavering. I kept thinking about what you said at the club, about tomorrow. You should sleep, I said, keeping my voice neutral. You need to look rested for the photos. Jade let out a frustrated huff and stomped her foot a muted thump on the carpet. She walked over to the desk chair, moved my laptop bag, and sat down, pulling her knees up to her chest. Why do you always have to do this? She asked. Tears began to well up in her eyes, spilling over faster than she could wipe them away. Why do you always have to make everything so heavy? It is my wedding, Ivy. It is supposed to be the happiest week of my life, and you are walking around like a dark cloud, sucking the joy out of everything. I am not trying to be a cloud, Jade, I said. I am trying to be a person who owns her own home. It is always about money with you, she cried out, keeping her voice low so as not to wake our parents. You think you are so perfect because you have a job and a mortgage and a 401k. You think you are better than us. I don't think I am better, I said. I think I am solvent. There is a difference. You don't understand what it is like, Jade said, wiping her nose with the back of her expensive sleeve. You were always the smart one. You were the one Dad bragged about because of your grades. I was just the pretty one. That is all I had. Mom would look at my report card and sigh. But then she would buy me a new dress and tell me not to worry because I would marry well. Do you know how much pressure that is, to be the doll, to be the trophy? I watched her. I had suspected this dynamic for years, but hearing her say it out loud was different. It was a crack in the porcelain. I know they put pressure on you, I said softer. I know Mom lives vicariously through you. She does, Jade sniffled. She wants this wedding to be perfect because she never had one like this. She wants me to have the life she thinks she deserves, and I am trying, Ivy. I am trying so hard to play the part. I found Ryan. I got the ring. I built the brand. I am doing exactly what they raised me to do. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. So why can't you just let us have this, she asked. Why can't you just be the big sister who fixes it? You always fix it. You are the strong one. We need you to be strong one last time. Being strong doesn't mean letting people rob you, I said. It is not robbery, Jade insisted, her voice gaining a frantic edge. It is restructuring. Mom explained it to me. She said the Seattle market was peaking and it was the perfect time to sell. She said you were too busy to handle the paperwork, so she did it for you. She said we would use the money for the wedding, and then when Ryan gets his bonus next year, or when the cabin sells, we would pay you back and help you buy a better place, a penthouse, something you actually deserve. The room went deadly silent. I stared at her. She had stopped crying. She was looking at me with an earnest, wide-eyed expression, waiting for me to agree with the logic. Jade, I said slowly, you just admitted it. Admitted what? You knew, I said. You knew the money for the wedding was coming from the sale of my house. You knew they sold it without asking me. You knew the glitch with the bank wasn't a glitch, but a transfer delay from the sale. Jade blinked. She shifted uncomfortably in the chair. Well, I didn't know all the technical details, she mumbled, looking away. I just knew. I knew there was a plan. I knew Mom found a way to make it work. And I thought, honestly, Ivy, I thought you would understand. I thought you would want to help. You said you wanted me to have the perfect day. So you decided to sell my sanctuary, I said. You decided that my home was less important than your flowers and your fireworks. It is just a house, Ivy, Jade snapped, throwing her hands up. It is wood and brick. This is my future. This is the family's reputation. Why are you so attached to that old place anyway? You are never there. You are always working. It is selfish to hoard an asset like that when the family needs liquidity. Selfish to hoard an asset. Those were not Jade's words. That was Linda speaking through Jade's mouth. I reached over to the nightstand and picked up my phone. You say you didn't know the technical details, I said, unlocking the screen. You say you were just following Mom's lead. You want me to believe you were a passive observer. I was, Jade said. I just signed what they put in front of me. Let's see, I said. I opened the video file Investigator Miller had sent me. I turned the volume up and held the screen out to Jade. On the small screen, the black and white footage from the notary's office played. There was Jade. She was wearing a designer tracksuit. She was holding a venti latte in one hand and her phone in the other. Okay, guys, Jade's voice chirped from the video. Recording a story for her social media. Mom is signing the house magic right now. We are literally manifesting abundance. Goodbye, dusty old vibes. Hello, platinum wedding in the video. She lowered the phone, took a sip of her latte, and laughed as the notary stamped the document. She grabbed the pen and signed the witness line without even reading the header. I watched the color drain from Jade's face in the dim light of the bedroom. She looked from the screen to me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. That, she whispered. Where did you get that? The state investigators pulled it, I said, along with the notary log, along with the bank records where you signed the signature card for the trust account that received the stolen funds. I lowered the phone. You didn't just know, Jade, I said. You celebrated it. You called my home dusty old vibes while you watched Mom forge my consent. You weren't coerced. You were having fun. Jade stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. You are spying on us, she hissed. You are actually insane. You hired someone to spy on your own family. I hired someone to find out why my house was sold, I corrected. And I found out my sister was an accomplice. I am not a criminal, Jade shouted, forgetting to keep her voice down. I am a bride. I didn't do anything wrong, I just wanted my wedding. That is the problem, I said calmly. You wanted it so much that you didn't care who you hurt to get it. I looked at her, standing there in her white silk, trembling with rage and fear. Tomorrow, I said. There is going to be a prosecutor at the venue, and right now, they are looking at you as a co-conspirator. I have a choice to make. Jade, I can tell them that you were bullied by Mom and Dad, that you didn't understand what you were signing, that you are just the doll who does what she is told. Jade's eyes lit up with a flicker of hope. Yes, she said breathlessly. Yes, tell them that. Tell them I didn't know. But this video, I said, tapping the phone against my palm. This video says otherwise. This video shows a woman who is fully aware and delighted by the fraud. So, tell me, Jade, which clip do you want them to play in court? Jade stared at me with pure hatred. The little sister I used to protect was gone. In her place was a stranger who looked at me like I was an obstacle to be removed. You are just jealous, she spat out. The words were venomous. That is what this is. You are jealous because I am getting the fairy tale and you are 34 and alone. You are jealous because Mom and Dad love me enough to take a risk for me, and they wouldn't even buy you a car. Take a risk, I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. They didn't take a risk, Jade. They took my property. Because you didn't need it, she screamed. You have everything. And you are trying to ruin the one thing I have because you can't stand seeing me shine. You are pathetic. I reached into my laptop bag. I pulled out a single piece of paper. It was a document I had drafted on the plane ride over. before the anger had fully calcified into resolve. "Here," I said, holding it out to her. "What is this?" she asked, not taking it. "Read it," I said. She snatched it from my hand. She scanned the page, her eyes narrowing. "Loan agreement," she read, "between Ivy Lopez and Jade Lopez. Principal amount $100,000. Interest rate 3%. Repayment term 10 years. She looked up at me, confused. "What is this?" "I drafted this on the flight," I said. "I was going to offer it to you. I was going to sit you down and say, 'Jade, I know you want this wedding. I know Mom and Dad are broke. I will lend you the money myself. We will do it legally. You can pay me back $50 a month if that is all you can afford. But we will do it the right way.'" Jade stared at the paper. Her hands started to shake. "I was ready to give you the money," I said quietly. "I was ready to be the big sister who saves the day. All you had to do was ask. All you had to do was treat me like a person, not an ATM. But," Jade's voice faltered, "but Mom said you wouldn't help. She said we had to take it." "Mom lied," I said, "and you chose to believe her because it was easier than having a difficult conversation with me. You chose the theft because you didn't respect me enough to ask for the loan." I took the paper back from her limp hand. I tore it in half. Then I tore it in half again. "This was the mature way to handle it," I said, dropping the pieces into the trash can by the desk. "But you and Mom chose the other way. You chose to steal, so now you have to live with that choice." Jade looked at the torn paper in the bin. For a second, I saw regret. Real, terrifying regret. She realized that she could have had everything she wanted: the wedding, the money, the sister if she had just been honest. But the moment passed. The entitlement rushed back in to protect her ego. "You are a monster," she whispered. "If you do anything to ruin my wedding tomorrow, if you say one word to anyone, you are dead to me. I will never speak to you again. I will not consider you family." "Jade," I said, lying back down and pulling the covers up, "look around you. Look at this house. Look at the lies. If this is what you call family, then being disowned is the greatest gift you could give me." "I hate you," she said again, her voice breaking. "Close the door on your way out," I said. She turned and stormed out. She slammed the door so hard that the picture frame on the wall, the one of us at the beach, rattled and tilted to the side, crooked and broken. I lay in the dark silence that followed. I waited for the tears. I waited for the crushing sense of loss. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange sense of confirmation. I had spent my entire adult life trying to buy their love. I thought if I wrote enough checks, if I solved enough problems, if I was successful enough, they would finally see me. They would finally value me. But tonight, Jade had confirmed the truth. They didn't see me. They saw a resource. They saw a credit limit. They saw a house in Seattle that could be liquidated to buy fireworks. I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't a sister. I was an asset class. And tomorrow, the asset was going to liquidate itself. I stared up at the glow-in-the-dark stars. They were fading now, their light nearly gone after 20 years. "Goodbye, Jade," I whispered to the empty room. I closed my eyes and finally, for the first time in days, I slept. I slept the deep, dreamless sleep of someone who has nothing left to lose. Willowcrest Vineyard did not look like a crime scene. It looked like a spread in a high-end bridal magazine, the kind that costs $15 at the airport newsstand. The morning sun filtered through the leaves of the ancient oak trees, casting dappled shadows on the white silk ribbons that adorned every chair. The air smelled of expensive lilies, fresh-cut grass, and the distinct, crisp scent of old money, or at least, the pretense of it. I walked through the perfectly manicured lawn, my heels sinking slightly into the grass. I was wearing the pale pink maid-of-honor dress that Jade had selected. It was simple, elegant, and cost $400, an amount that had been charged to my credit card 6 months ago, back when I thought I was just being a supportive sister. Now, it felt like a uniform, I was a soldier behind enemy lines, wearing their colors while carrying the codes to destroy their fortifications. Guests were beginning to arrive. These were the elite of Redstone Hills, along with a smattering of minor local politicians and business owners my father wanted to impress. They moved in a sea of pastel chiffon and navy blazers, holding flutes of champagne that I knew for a fact had been paid for with the deposit on my Seattle home. Ivy, Mrs. Henderson, the wife of the lawyer who had drafted that original power of attorney 16 years ago, waved at me. She rushed over, clutching a designer clutch. "Oh, look at you. You look radiant. And your parents." "Charles was just telling us about how well you are doing in Seattle, a luxury condo downtown. That is so impressive, dear. It is so good to see a young woman knowing when to trade up." "Trade up," I repeated, my voice smooth and devoid of emotion. "Yes, that is certainly one way to describe it." "And this wedding," she gushed, gesturing to the sprawling floral archway that framed the altar. "Jade is a lucky girl. Your parents have really outdone themselves. It is so rare to see families supporting each other like this in today's world. Charles is such a provider." I smiled. It was a sharp, razor-thin smile. "He certainly provides," I said. "He finds resources where no one else would even think to look." She laughed, missing the subtext entirely, and drifted away to find her seat. I kept walking. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. Everyone saw the dutiful sister. Everyone saw the success story. No one saw the plaintiff. I made my way to the edge of the seating area, near the trellis covered in wisteria. Marcus was waiting for me. He looked different today. He wasn't wearing his usual rumpled lawyer suit. He was sharp, dressed in a charcoal suit that fit perfectly, his face shaved clean, but his eyes were alert, scanning the perimeter like a Secret Service agent. "Status?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "The perimeter is secure," Marcus said. He reached into his inside jacket pocket and pulled out a thin manila envelope. He didn't hand it to me immediately. He held it for a second, looking at me. "This is it, Ivy. Inside this envelope is the certified copy of the temporary restraining order on the assets, the freezing injunction from the court, and the filed criminal complaint for wire fraud and theft. Once you hand this to the officers, there is no unringing the bell." I took the envelope. It felt incredibly light for something that was about to crush 3 lives. "Where are they?" I asked. Marcus nodded toward a group of people standing near the back, by the catering tent. They were dressed as guest suits, dresses, holding programs, but they weren't mingling. They were watching. "Investigator Miller is in the blue dress," Marcus said. "The 2 men with her are plainclothes officers from the fraud unit. The man in the gray suit is the assistant district attorney. They are ready. They are just waiting for your signal." I looked at Miller. She caught my eye and gave a barely perceptible nod. She didn't smile. This wasn't a party to her. It was a takedown. "Okay," I said, clutching the envelope against the silk of my dress. "I am ready." "You don't have to do it during the ceremony," Marcus said softly. "We can wait until the reception. It would be quieter." "They didn't steal my house quietly." "Marcus," I said, looking toward the bridal suite where my family was hiding. "They did it loudly. They bragged about it on social media. They turned my trauma into content. I am just returning the energy." Inside the bridal suite, the air was thick with hairspray and denial. Jade sat in front of the illuminated vanity mirror. She was staring at her reflection, but she didn't look like the triumphant princess she had been yesterday. Her skin was pale. Her hands, resting on her lap, were trembling slightly. The conversation from last night, the video, the torn loan agreement was hanging over her head like a guillotine blade. Linda was hovering behind her, fussing with the veil. My mother looked manic. Her smile was too wide, her movements too jerky. She was running on adrenaline and the terrified hope that if she just kept moving, the reality of the declined credit cards would disappear. "You look perfect," Linda said, her voice tight. "Ryan is going to die when he sees you. The photos are going to be iconic. We will make the cover of Colorado Bride. I just know it." "Mom," Jade whispered. not meeting her eyes. What if she does it? What if Ivy actually does it? Does what? Linda scoffed, aggressively fluffing the tulle of the veil. "Cousin, please. Ivy is a lot of things: boring, obsessive, a workaholic, but she is not cruel. She loves you, and more importantly, she cares about what people think. She won't embarrass us in front of the whole town. She doesn't have the stomach for it." "She looked different last night," Jade said, her voice shaking. "She looked done. She showed me a video. Mom, she knows I was at the notary." Linda froze for a fraction of a second, her hands stilled on the veil. Then, just as quickly, she resumed her motion. "She is bluffing," Linda said firmly. "She is trying to scare you because she is jealous. She wants you to beg. Don't give her the satisfaction. Listen to me, Jade. Ivy knows she owes this family. Who drove her to piano lessons? Who paid for her braces? We made her who she is. This money. It is just a return on investment. She will get over it. She always does." Jade looked at her mother in the mirror. For the first time, she didn't look reassured. She looked trapped. But the dress was already on. The guests were already seated. The train had left the station, and Jade realized too late that she was tied to the tracks. Outside, near the altar, Charles Lopez was sweating through his custom-made shirt. He checked his phone for the 50th time in 10 minutes. He had missed 3 calls from the Redstone Hills Credit Union. He had missed 2 calls from the fraud department of the receiving bank. Now, the phone was vibrating again. Unknown caller. He stared at the screen. His thumb hovered over the decline button. "Charles," a friend called out, slapping him on the back. "Big day. You must be proud. Writing the check for a shindig like this. You are a better man than me." Charles shoved the phone into his pocket. Silencing the ringing, he forced a laugh. "Anything for my girls," he boomed, his voice loud and hearty. "You know me. Go big or go home." He pulled the phone back out under the cover of his jacket. He opened the Facebook app instead of his banking app. He scrolled through the comments on his status update from this morning, proud father of the bride. "Beautiful day for a beautiful wedding. Congrats, Charles. You guys really know how to throw a party. Looking sharp. Success suits you. Hope the market is treating you well." He read the comments, letting the praise soothe the panic rising in his chest. It was a glitch. It had to be a glitch. He would go to the bank on Monday and yell at the manager until they released the funds. He was Charles Lopez. He always fixed it. He turned off his phone. Reality could wait until Monday. Today, he was the king of the castle. The string quartet began to play Pachelbel's Canon in D. The conversation in the garden died down as the guests took their seats. The white wooden chairs creaked as 200 people settled in, turning their faces toward the aisle. I took my place at the front, standing opposite the best man. I held my bouquet of white roses low, hiding the trembling of my hands. The envelope was tucked securely into the hidden pocket of my dress, a feature I had specifically requested from the tailor 2 days ago. The officiant, a local pastor with a kind smile, stood at the altar. Ryan was there, looking nervous and happy, completely unaware that his future in-laws were financing his wedding with a felony. The music swelled. The bridesmaids walked down the aisle one by one. Then, the flower girl. Then, the music changed. The heavy romantic chords of 1,000 years began to play. The guests stood up. But before the bride appeared, the wedding planner, a frantic woman with a headset, signaled to the AV team. "And now," the MC's voice boomed over the speakers. "Before our bride makes her entrance, Charles and Linda wanted to share a brief tribute to the journey that brought us here, a story of love, family, and success." A large projection screen, hidden discreetly to the side of the altar, flickered to life. A slideshow began. It started with baby pictures of Jade. Jade in a tutu, Jade winning a pageant, Jade and Ryan. Then, the narrative shifted. The text on the screen read, "Built on family support." A photo appeared. My breath caught in my throat. It was a photo of my house in Seattle, my beautiful craftsman bungalow with the deep porch and the hydrangeas. I had sent that photo to my mother 3 years ago when I finished painting the exterior. I was so proud of it. Now, it was projected 10 feet high for 200 strangers to see. But the caption didn't say Ivy's house. The caption read, Ivy's next chapter, upgrading the lifestyle. Then, the next slide. A picture of the sold sign pounded into my lawn, a picture I had never seen. Presumably taken by the real estate agent my parents had hired behind my back. Caption, sacrificing the old to build the new. Thanks for the upgrade. Ivy. A murmur went through the crowd. People turned to look at me, smiling, nodding. They thought it was sweet. They thought I had sold my starter home to buy a penthouse and, out of the goodness of my heart, contributed to the wedding. They were applauding my erasure. I stared at the screen. I felt the heat rise up my neck. This was it. This was the final insult. They weren't just stealing my money. They were stealing my narrative. They were rewriting reality to make themselves the heroes and me the happy, compliant donor. If I let this happen, I thought, the clarity hitting me like a lightning strike. If I let them play this slideshow and walk down this aisle, I am agreeing with them. I am signing the social contract that says my abuse is acceptable as long as it looks pretty. I looked out at the crowd. I saw Investigator Miller. She was watching the screen, her face hard. She looked at me. She raised one eyebrow, a silent question. Now I looked at the envelope in my pocket. I felt the sharp corner of the paper against my hip. The slideshow ended. The screen went dark. And now, the MC announced, his voice dropping to a reverent whisper. Please welcome the bride. The double doors of the Vineyard estate opened. The sunlight poured through, creating a halo effect. Jade stood there. She was breathtaking. The dress the one paid for with my down payment was a cloud of lace and silk. Her veil trailed 3 feet behind her. Charles stood next to her, puffing out his chest, offering his arm. He looked like he owned the world. They began to walk. Step, step, step. The guests sighed in admiration. Cameras clicked. I watched them come closer. I saw Jade's face. She was smiling, but her eyes were darting around. Frantic. She was looking for me. She was scanning the front row, trying to gauge if she was safe. They reached the halfway point of the aisle. Investigator Miller stepped out from the back row. She didn't draw a weapon. She just stepped into the aisle, blocking the path, followed by the 2 uniformed officers and the assistant district attorney. The music faltered. The violinist missed a note, a screeching sound that cut through the air. Charles stopped. He frowned, looking at the people blocking his moment. Excuse me, Charles hissed, low enough that the back row couldn't hear, but loud enough for the camera. We are in the middle of a ceremony. Please step aside. Miller didn't move. She reached into her jacket and pulled out her badge, hanging it around her neck. The sunlight caught the metal shield. Charles Lopez, Linda Harper. Miller's voice was calm, professional, and carried perfectly in the sudden silence. The guests began to whisper, heads turned. The confusion was palpable. Was this part of the show? Was this a surprise? I stepped forward. I walked from my spot at the altar to the center of the aisle. Standing 10 feet in front of Jade and Charles, the music stopped completely. The silence was deafening. Jade saw me. Her eyes locked onto mine. In that split second, the time froze. She saw the envelope in my hand. She saw the look on my face. It wasn't anger. It wasn't jealousy. It was the absolute, terrifying calm of a person who has stopped negotiating. Jade's mouth opened slightly. A silent word formed on her lips. Please. I looked at her. I looked at the sister I had protected from bullies. The sister I had tutored. The sister I had loved more than I loved myself. And then I looked at the slideshow screen. Blank now, but still burning in my mind. Upgrading the lifestyle. I turned to Investigator Miller. Officer, I said, my voice ringing out clear and steady in the vineyard air. I am the plaintiff. I held out the envelope. Here are the signed complaints for felony wire fraud, identity theft, and forgery against Charles Lopez, Linda Harper, and Jade Lopez. A gasp ripped through the crowd. It was a physical sound, like all the oxygen had been sucked out of the garden. Charles turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. "Ivy!" he roared, forgetting the guests, forgetting the facade. "What the hell are you doing? Get back in line." "No," I said. Miller stepped forward, flanked by the officers. She walked past me and stopped in front of my father. "Charles Lopez," Miller said, "I have a warrant for your arrest for Class 3 felony theft. Please place your hands behind your back." Linda, who had been sitting in the front row, stood up with a shriek. "This is a mistake. This is a prank, Ivy. Tell them it is a prank." I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had birthed me and then sold me out for a center spread in a magazine. "It is not a prank, Mom," I said. "It is a closing statement." One of the officers moved toward Jade. Jade recoiled, stepping back on her train. "No," she whimpered. "No, I am the bride. You can't touch me. I am the bride." "Jade Lopez," the officer said, his voice bored. "We have video evidence of you witnessing a forged document and knowingly benefiting from the proceeds of a crime. Hands behind your back, ma'am." The officer reached out. He grabbed her wrist, the one with the diamond bracelet I had bought her for graduation, and twisted it behind the white silk of her dress. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound I had ever heard. Ryan, the groom, stood at the altar, his mouth hanging open, looking from his fiancée in handcuffs to his future father-in-law being patted down. I stood alone in the center of the chaos. The guests were standing up, phones out, recording the destruction of the Lopez dynasty. I looked at Jade one last time. She was crying now. Ugly. Mascara-streaked tears. Screaming my name. "Ivy. Help me, Ivy." I didn't move. I didn't flinch. "I did help you," I whispered to myself. "I taught you that actions have consequences." The wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the oak trees. The storm had finally broken, and I was the only one standing dry in the center of it. The murmurs of the crowd were like the buzzing of angry bees, as Investigator Miller motioned for her officers to guide my parents toward the small administrative building behind the vineyard's main hall. "We need to discuss a sensitive matter regarding financial assets," Miller announced, her voice projecting just enough to be heard by the front row, which included the mayor and Ryan's terrified parents. Linda, ever the performer, tried to laugh. She waved to the guests as she was escorted away, her other hand gripping Charles's arm so tightly her knuckles were white. "Just a misunderstanding. Everyone, please, enjoy the champagne. We will be right back." But I saw the way her smile faltered. I saw the way Charles's face had turned the color of old ash. I followed them. I didn't look at the guests. I walked with my head high, past the whispering, past the phones recording my family's disintegration. Inside the small office, the air was stifling. The officers closed the blinds. The sounds of the string quartet outside were muffled, reduced to a pathetic, scratching soundtrack. "This is outrageous," Linda hissed, spinning around to face Miller the moment the door clicked shut. "Do you know who we are? We are the victims here. Our daughter gave us verbal permission to sell that property. This is a family dispute, not a crime scene." "It is a crime scene, Mrs. Lopez," the prosecutor said, stepping forward from the shadows of the corner. "We are investigating Class 3 felony fraud, abuse of power of attorney, and theft by deception, and we have the victim right here." He gestured to me. Linda turned her glare on me. It was a look that had controlled me for 30 years. "Ivy, tell them you said it was okay. Tell them we talked about this at Christmas. Tell them you are just confused." I stepped forward. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I walked to the oak table in the center of the room and opened the thick file I had been carrying. "Here is the bank statement showing the $112,000 I already paid for this wedding," I said, laying the paper down with a soft slap. "Here is the email where you promised the money was a loan," I continued, laying the next sheet down. "Here is the unsigned loan agreement I drafted because I still wanted to help you. Even after I suspected what you were doing," I said. "And here," I said, placing a USB drive on the stack, "is the security footage of you and Jade laughing while you forged my consent." Linda stared at the pile. She opened her mouth to argue, to spin another web, but Marcus stepped into the room. "There is one more thing you should know," Marcus said, his voice calm and deadly. "The buyer of the Seattle property, the investment fund that purchased it for cash." Charles looked up, sweat dripping down his temple. "What about them?" "I advise that fund," Marcus said. "They have agreed to void the transaction. They signed an affidavit this morning stating that if fraud is proven, they will rescind the sale to set a legal precedent. They don't want stolen property." I watched the realization hit my parents. It hit them harder than the handcuffs. "That means," I said, "that the house goes back to me, the money goes back to the fund, and you two go to jail with nothing. You don't get to sell my home to save yourselves. The lifeboat is gone." The door opened, and an officer brought Jade in. She was still crying, her mascara running in black streaks down her cheeks, ruining the perfect face she had prepared for the cameras. She looked at the room her parents cornered, me standing tall, the police blocking the door. "Jade," the prosecutor said, "we have the video of you at the notary. We know you signed the witness statement. That makes you a co-conspirator. You are facing 5 to 10 years. Jade let out a sob, clutching her tulle skirt. "However," the prosecutor continued, "we know the dynamic here. If you are willing to testify that your parents misled you about Ivy's consent and that they orchestrated the sale, we might consider reducing your involvement to a misdemeanor." The room went silent. Jade looked at Linda. Linda's eyes were wide, pleading, silent commands to hold the line, "Don't betray the family." Then Jade looked at me. She looked at the sister she had called jealous. She looked at the sister she had tried to rob. She looked at the person who had held the family together while she played princess. "They told me you agreed," Jade whispered, her voice shaking. "Jade," Linda shrieked, "don't you dare!" "They told me," Jade said, louder this time, turning to the prosecutor. "They said Ivy was too busy to sign. They said it was a surprise. I didn't ask her because I didn't want to know the truth. But I knew. Deep down, I knew." She turned to me. "I didn't ask you because I knew you would say no, and I wanted the money more than I wanted your respect." "That is my fault." "You traitor," Linda screamed, lunging toward Jade before an officer held her back. "After everything we did for you, we stole for you, we lied for you, you ungrateful little brat. I am the victim here. My children are destroying me." Charles slumped into a chair. He looked at the confession Jade had just made. He looked at the evidence on the table. For the first time in his life, he stopped fighting. He stopped pretending he was the big man. "Where do I sign?" Charles whispered. "I want to make a deal." "Charles." Linda gasped. "It is over, Linda," he said, his voice broken. "The cards are declined. The house is gone. It is over." The prosecutor handed Charles a clipboard. "Your assets are frozen pending the restitution order," the prosecutor said. "We will begin the booking process immediately." I turned to Jade. She was standing there, stripped of her arrogance, stripped of her fantasy. She looked like a child again. "Today is still your wedding day, technically," I said to her. "You can walk out there and marry Ryan. You can pretend this didn't happen, or you can start your life over." I looked at the dress that cost more than my first car. "You can't build a marriage on a crime scene, Jade," I said. "Start a new life, not by living on someone else's back, but by standing on your own feet." Jade looked down at her ring. She looked at the door where Ryan was waiting. Slowly, she reached up and unpinned her veil. She folded it and placed it on the table next to the evidence file. "I can't go out there," she whispered. "Cancel it." "Jade, no," Linda wailed. "Cancel it," Jade said firmly to the officer. "Tell them the wedding is off. I am not walking down that aisle. I am not marrying him with stolen money." It was the first adult decision she had ever made. I nodded. I didn't hug her. I didn't comfort her. I just nodded. The officers began to lead my parents away. Linda was sobbing. Charles was silent. Jade sat in the chair, burying her face in her hands. I turned and walked out of the room. The MC was already at the microphone, his voice wavering as he announced a family emergency and asked the guests to vacate the premises. The buzz of confusion, the rustle of silk, the sound of expensive cars starting up, it was the soundtrack of a facade crumbling. I didn't feel ashamed. I didn't feel embarrassed. I felt light. I felt like I had finally put down a heavy backpack I had been carrying since I was 18 years old. Marcus was waiting for me by the vineyard gates. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the grapevines. "It is done," he said. "It is done," I answered. My phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. It was an email from the county clerk, forwarded by Marcus's office. Notice of title reversion 2409, Queen Anne Avenue North. Owner Ivy Lopez. Status active. I took a deep breath of the cool mountain air. "I paid $100,000 for this wedding," I said, looking at the empty venue where the waiters were already packing up the untouched champagne. "That is an expensive party," Marcus said. "No," I said. "It was the price of a lesson. I paid $100,000 to learn that family is not a group of people who have the right to use your life as an unlimited credit card." I looked back one last time. I saw the police cruiser lights flashing against the white tent. I saw the ruins of the perfect day. "Let's go home," I said. "To Seattle?" Marcus asked. "To Seattle." I smiled. "To my house." We turned and walked away, leaving the wreckage of the Lopez family reputation behind us. My home had never really been four walls in Seattle. My home was the boundary I had just built right here, today, and for the first time in my life, the foundation was all mine. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on Ivy's revenge. Don't forget to subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more listeners.